Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Winter W. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm reviewing the movie The Brave. This is a film that I came across, I'm going to say somewhere between mid to late 2020. And I've shared this story before on more than one occasion, but I'll give it a Cliff Notes version of it. I became a fan of the actor Louis Mandylor ever since I saw the film The Debt Collector, which he had starred alongside with Scott Adkins and is also directed by Jesse V. Johnson. I love that movie, but I really love Louis Mandylor's performance in that film. That performance made me a fan of Louis Mandylor. And after that movie, I decided to check out some of his other works, and one of the first ones I came across was The Brave. When I saw this movie, I was blown away with how good that movie really is. Like, I was severely impressed with that film. I love this movie. So as you can tell by now, you may know where the rating's going to be heading to by the end of this review here. But as a result of this movie, I also became a fan of the film's director, Will Kaufman, who I actually reviewed one of his movies last year back in August of 2021 for the film Daylight's End. And if you've not seen that review, I recommend you guys do check it out. I'll make sure to have the icon for you to click on there. And I also recommend you also do check out the film because that movie is fantastic and I think you guys will get a kick out of it as well. But as far as The Brave is concerned, I looked up on IMDb to see when this film was released, and according to IMDb, this movie was released back on January 15th of 2020. So if that's correct, this is going to be the 2-year anniversary of this film's release. But so by the time this video does get uploaded, it'll be on the 15th or the 16th, either one of those days, and time is for its anniversary. And I will say that as many times I've seen this movie, and I've seen this movie, and this is no exaggeration, over 20 times, I've come to love this film more and more and more. So I've been waiting for a long time to talk about this movie in time for the film's anniversary here. So I will get into the plot here. No spoilers, of course. I'll also get into my positives, my negatives, and then, of course, my rating. An elite group of cops set out to end the war waged against the local police in an Albanian town known for drug production and trafficking in this action thriller based on true life events. And that right there is the film in a nutshell. So now let's get into my positives. My first positive with this film is with the overall story in itself. I love this story for two reasons. The first one that comes to mind is that one character points out that he is tired of how Albanians are depicted in this movie, because this movie does take place in Albania, and he would like for Hollywood to portray Albanians in an accurate manner, that they're not all bad people, that there are some really good people. It's a great country, it's a great culture, and he's tired of Hollywood in depicting them as villains and would like to see that change. So that was the first thing that caught my attention, which I honestly had to agree with here, because I think one of the first ones that came to mind that depicted Albanians as more or less as kind of like villains is Taken, which I think is a great movie, but I did remember specifically when he said that the first one that came to mind was Taken, as showcasing the Albanians as being villains. But the next thing I also loved about the movie too is that because of that, Albania wants to join the European Union, but they know that they have a lot of corruption, and the police force in the country are trying to clean out that corruption. They're trying to take out a lot of these authority figures that have been corrupted and have continued on this corruption throughout the years, and they want to systematically take them all down, but they know it's going to be a very difficult and arduous process. And one of the top people they're trying to get to is an American who has helped Albania and continue on with that corruption, more or less. So I thought that approach was extremely interesting, and it definitely gave it a much more epic scale, and it gave it a very what's the word I want to use? It gave a lot of leverage as far as the reasons why they're taking on this major task and the amount of consequences they're gonna have to be dealing with because they're going after these top authority figures that want to maintain their power, allowing the corruption to continue on, so that way they can reap the benefits from that. So I thought that was a very, very smart approach, and a very unique one at that. So I think that was one of the best things about the movie that I noticed right off the bat. The next positive is with the directing under Will Kaufman. Will Kaufman, in my opinion, is a truly underrated director. If you've seen my review that I've done for the film Daylight's End, I've given him a lot of compliments about the directing of the story, dealing with a very heavy subject matter, but also infusing some new takes on a genre that has been oversaturated when it comes to the zombie genre, where he's doing something slightly different and giving its own identity to not make it very similar to all the other things we've seen before, but trying something new with a little twist here and there that I think worked very effectively, especially when it came to the character story that he has done so successfully with that film. And in this movie, I think he does that very well as well too. One thing I also want to point out too is that although I do believe he's been a very good director from the films I've seen that he's done in the past, after I've seen The Brave, I can clearly see that he's gotten better when it comes to directing. Not to say that the other films weren't as good, they definitely were, but you can clearly see the years of experience. He's gotten better and better and better. And this movie, in my opinion, showcases all the strengths that he has showed before in previous movies, that he's just gotten better with this film, and some other areas as well too, that I felt like that I always felt like he had the ability to pull off, and providing a much more having a bigger cast and dealing with a number of different characters and getting to know some of their backstories as well too along the way, without making too convoluted. And I think he did that beautifully, in my opinion, with this film, and giving some time with the characters to really allow them to tell their story in some degree, but also understand that we have to keep things moving forward and still keep it entertaining along the way. I think he does that very effortlessly, in my opinion, with this film. So Will Kaufman is one of those directors that I always look forward to checking out with any new projects he's got coming down the pipeline, especially with the film that he's co-directing with the actor Johnny Strong in War Horse 1, which I'm extremely excited for. And that is my number one most anticipated movie this year, and this is no joke. I really want to see this film. I think this movie is going to be like the one that will put his name and him and Johnny Strong's name at a whole nother level, which I really do hope that will happen. And I trust that the film is going to be very, very good with the amount of work and time they spent on working on that film. And he's also got another movie coming down the line here later this year called The Channel, which I'm also very looking forward to as well. So I kind of went off on a tangent about Will Kaufman, but this guy deserves that recognition because he is really good at what he does. And this movie, in my opinion, does showcase the reasons why he's the best at what he does, in my opinion. The other positive has to do with the script in itself. The script is written by Marco Balsamo, who also is the producer on this movie as well. And if I remember hearing correctly, I believe he had gone over to Albania, I think for the first time a number of years ago. And considering how Hollywood has depicted Albania being pretty much a very corrupted country with a lot of crime and people who are pretty much entrenched into that crime culture, if you will, he had realized that Albania is nothing like that, at least from his experience out there, where he realized that there are some great people, the country is beautiful, and not that many people really know about the country too much. So he really wanted to give it a positive light and positive image, and sharing a story with a group of people who are trying to overcome the stereotypes that they've been depicted as being villains in mainstream Hollywood films, and showcasing that they are very capable of being great, heroic individuals out there, especially when they work together, overcoming the odds that are thrown against them. So I thought that with the way the script was handled in this movie worked very effectively. So a lot of kudos to Mr. Balsamo, who done a great job in writing this film. The other positive for me is with the cast. Now, I'm going to say this right now. There are some things I did have issues with certain character beats that I had problems with upon repeat viewing that I've come across as I watch the film more and more, which I'll get a little bit to my negatives. But for me, those positives about those character moments certainly do outweigh the negatives. So as far as the overall cast is concerned, I really did enjoy the performances, and I also enjoyed the characters that they portray in this movie, because there's something about each of those characters that you get to learn about along the way, where you have a lot of people in the story, and there's very little time to spend with them to a degree, with the exception of the main lead played by Louis Manlor in this film, that he plays the character of Ray, where you definitely get to learn a little bit more about his background, which I'll be getting into a little bit here. But the overall crew in this film, there's something about each of these characters that, in my opinion, you get to understand where they're coming from. And considering that even though a few of them were not necessarily raised in Albania, they still have connections to their home country, because they understand that Albania has this tainted image that people are portraying Albanians in a negative light, and they really want to change all that, and they're very passionate about that. So you really do get behind with their motivation and why they want to take on this task, knowing full and well that it's a very, very dangerous job, knowing full and well they could die at any moment's notice, but they still are very passionate about what it is they're trying to change, with the amount of crime that has been invested with this country that they want to just take out completely, knowing it's going to take some time and it's going to be a lot of hard work, but they understand that it's for the best of the country, and in turn for the best of the people in the country. And I think that's a very beautiful thing, that you get to learn about these characters along the way, understanding a little bit of their background to see why it's important for them to be invested with this mission that they're on here to get the job done. And Louis Manlor is one of those actors that I believe is, no matter what he does, no matter what he's given, he's always going to give 100% no matter what. And I don't feel like he's ever given a phony performance, and if he has, I couldn't tell, because I'm telling you, this guy is incredible when it comes to him delivering the performances for the character that he's portraying and doing the character justice. And with this movie, I've come to appreciate this character that he plays in Ray more and more, especially after a conversation I had with him last year on my show called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, where he had shared that Will Kaufman had called him and offered him the part to play in The Brave. And he accepted the part, and he said, where are you guys shooting? I need you to be here tomorrow in Bulgaria. So he got on a plane, went to Bulgaria, got there the next day, and he read the script on the way over. And when he had gotten there, they were literally like hours away from shooting on the first day, I believe. So he had shared that they were trying to figure out what kind of accent his character is going to have, but they had hours to decide before they started shooting. So they eventually decided to go more with a standard, pretty much a American accent with a hint of New York, along with the Albanian accent kind of creeping in there along the way too. And when you watch this movie, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little confused as far as why he had that accent. But when he had shared that story that the character at a very young age had left Albania and was raised in the States and then came back at a later part of in his life, it all made sense to me. So now I understand the bigger picture, why they went with that approach as opposed to going with a more standardized Albanian accent. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know how an Albanian accent sounds. I've never really been around Albanians, so I can't really tell the accuracy of the type of accent he's putting on there with that hint of Albanian kind of creeping in there. So I just rolled with it, and I didn't have a single problem with it. I never felt distracted by his accent by any means. I actually thought it worked very well. One major positive I'm going to point out here has to do with the shootout sequences in this film. Will Kaufman is one of the best who has ever done it. And the fact that, all the films he's worked on that I've come across here so far have all been low-budget films, each and every single time I watch his movies, the shootout sequences are top tier. They are some of the absolute best I've come across. And every single film he's worked on, he's gotten better and better and better each and every single time. And The Brave showcases that he's at the top of his form, and I cannot wait to see the shootout sequence that he's going to have alongside with Johnny Strong and Warhorse 1, and also in the channel that will be coming out later this year. So this movie, I think, is like the peak of what he's been able to showcase as far as what he's really, really good at, among other things, of course. But the shootout sequences in this film are some of the absolute best. And the great thing about that is that when you see one shootout sequences, they definitely are very epic, but each one got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the consequences were way more severe, and you definitely felt the weight of the consequences that as far as the aftermath of those shootout sequences are concerned. And the beautiful thing about this movie is that even though this is a low-budget film, it never feels that way at all. In fact, you can definitely feel the weight of the character's journey of what they're going through. And you as an audience member, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, I should say, that I felt the pain that they were going through, some of the losses that occur in the film, that you really felt for the guys. And I was really invested with the story because the consequences that we're going to be facing here does have some weight. And I think that with the shootout sequence, it just adds a whole lot more weight, because not only is it very exciting, but it's also very dangerous, and you feel for the guys and you're wondering, holy fuck, how they're going to get themselves out of this here. It sounds like I'm approaching it in a very cliche way, and I don't mean to do it that way, but I have no other way to really express my feeling towards that, because that's exactly how I felt about it. So I think that when it comes to the shootout sequences, this is some of the best ones I've seen in quite some time. And like I said before, Will Kaufman does a great job when it comes to the shootout sequences. And the one that happens at the very end of the movie, like the last 25 minutes, is fucking epic. My wife, who is not a major filmer like myself, she was doing something in the living room when I was watching this movie. And when the shootout scene had occurred at the very end of the movie, she stopped what she was doing, actually sat down with me and watched the remaining parts of that scene, of that shootout sequences. And I happened to look over and I said, do you like what you're watching? She was like, yeah, I think this is actually really good. And I was like, oh my God, that's fucking incredible. So the fact you can get my wife to sit down and watch that scene and be invested, that is an accomplishment. And I think Will Kaufman and everyone else involved in shooting those scenes have done a fantastic job. So kudos to everybody out there who shot that sequence, or all those sequences, I should say, because they've done a phenomenal job. Armand Assante, who is the main villain in this movie, although he is the villain in the film, I don't necessarily view him as the villain. His performance in this movie is fucking incredible. He is really, really good. I forget whenever I see him on screen that he's an incredible actor. He's one of those actors that I appreciate and I love what he does. And then the years have gone by, several films later, I come across something that he's done. I'm like, holy shit, Armand Assante is phenomenal. This movie does not waste his talents at all. He is a very effective character in this film, very integral to the story, and his delivery for a lot of the emotional beats that occur in this film is fucking phenomenal. And the fact that you can actually side with the character, even though you may not agree with his approach, you understand where he's coming from. And I don't necessarily view him as a villain, but I don't agree with his methods, but I understand why he does what he does. And when you see a lot of these emotional beats that occur in this film, especially with his character, you side with him. And I actually felt for the guy along the way, so without getting too spoilers here. But I think you guys will appreciate his story along the way too. And it's one of the reasons why I think the film works so effectively, because the villain in this movie is really not the villain. He's actually viewing himself as a good guy, considering the circumstances here, which you get to see a wonderful sequence in this movie, which I think is one of the most effective scenes in this film, because him and the other actor that played across him, whose name escapes me right now, I'm sure I'll have the picture and the name of the actor as well. They have a phenomenal sequence together that I think was very, very important to tell, to really understand the bigger picture along the way when it comes to how these two came to know each other and how it affects the relationship moving forward. That's a phenomenal story that I think was done beautifully, in my opinion. So now we can officially get into my negatives. My first negative with this movie has to do with the character of Ray, played by Louis Mandylor. The performance was not bad at all. I've already mentioned before, Louis Mandylor is fantastic in this movie. He is really, really good in this film. The issue that I had with the character is when you get to learn more about his background as far as what had happened to his family, why he left Albania at a young age to go to the United States and made his way back. For some reason, I felt like those particular sequences in the movie, when you see some of those flashbacks, didn't necessarily work for me all that well. And I've seen this movie, as I said before, over 20 times. And every single time, I never really had that connection with the character in that respect. I'm not saying that I didn't understand the journey, and nor did I not connect with it. I did, but I guess the way that it was delivered for the film just didn't really have much for me. It didn't really do much for me, I meant to say. So that would be my first negative here, which leads into another character in the movie whose name escapes me right now, which I'll have the image here for you to see. But she's the only female officer in this task force. When you get to learn more about her background, it makes a lot of sense, and it's a very effective part of the story that really works very well. For whatever reason, I felt like certain emotional beats just did not work for me at all. I almost felt like it was some of those sequences were a little rushed in terms of how you get to learn about her this character's background and understand where she's coming from and why this mission was very important for her. But I felt like the way it was handled in those specific moments when you are revealed that information, it just did not really do it much for me. But then as the story progresses along the way, I'm still very much invested with her journey. It was just in those isolated moments that really didn't do much for me. I didn't really have that effect. It didn't have that effect on me like it did for when you learn about Armand Assante's character and the police chief that is running this task force. When you get to hear about their relationship, I felt that right away. And that also goes the same for the emotional turmoil that a lot of these characters are going through those specific moments where you realize the loss that they're going through and you really felt for them. And then when it came to certain isolated moments about learning about their background, especially with Louis Mandylor's character and the actress that plays that lone female officer in the task force, certain moments in there just didn't work for me at all. My last negative for this film is with the hand-to-hand combat sequences in this film. Now, for me, although this is a negative for the movie, in my opinion, I actually didn't mind it that much. The reason for that is because, for those that know, I have a big problem when it comes to these quick edits that a lot of these action films do, where you don't really see the impact of the hits and you don't actually let the scene play itself out when it comes to someone being thrown off a building or having a kick land on someone's head. A lot of films do a terrible mistake of just quickly editing all that stuff out and just moving on to the next beat. This movie, in a weird way, kind of balances that out pretty well. I don't like it all that much, but I was actually okay with it. But I wish it could have just been done better. I'm not sure what it was that made that whoever decided to go through with that in editing it, the fight scenes that way, why they just couldn't allow the scenes to really play itself out. And of course, there's a number of different reasons why that would occur. Maybe the actors were not in the best shape and they couldn't really throw the punches that well as well, so they had to work around it. So that may be a possibility here. I don't know the whole story, so I'm not here to judge on that, but I just felt like it was done okay for me personally. But when it came to the shootout sequences, they were handled brilliantly, and you felt the epicness, you felt the impact, and you were invested. For me personally, when it came to the actual hand-to-hand combat sequences, it was okay. I didn't mind it. It was fine. And, you know, they are what they are for me personally. And I'm sure a lot of people who will watch it will think otherwise and think it's a great fight scenes that occur in the film, and that's fine. But I just thought it could be handled a little bit better. But that's going to be the end of my negative, so now let's get into my rating. So if you can't tell by now, I love this movie. This is one of the most surprising films I've come across in the last couple of years. I think this is a hidden gem. I think that what everyone has done with this movie, considering it's a low-budget film and that, you know, I'm sure they didn't have a lot of time to get a lot of things done with the amount of time that other larger big production and Hollywood films have. This movie, I think, has been able to accomplish a lot of the things that these mainstream films fail to accomplish, and they succeed in. And even though I had some negatives with the movie and certain character development that you see in the film and certain action sequences that I had a problem with, but was okay with though at the end of the day, the positives for me certainly outweigh the negatives by a long mile. And despite the fact that I have issues with some of the flaws in the film, I love this movie. This is a fantastic film. So for me, I give this movie a solid cheers. And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and make sure you share and like the videos and hit the notification bell while you're down there. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook, New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. Follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and we have social media for the show as well. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for joining me here today. Hope you guys did enjoy this review, and until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.